my first son was born, during that period of the 80s, I was hooked on cocaine. I wasn't any better than anyone else. I was on my kitchen floor thinking, oh, there's got to be something here that dropped last night, when suddenly it occurred to me that I had a baby in the room down the hall that was crying for me, and there was no one to tend to him.
Yeah.
And I was on the kitchen floor.
Yeah.
And I thought I pulled myself out of that. I patted myself on the back. Oh, good girl. You didn't have to go to rehab or anything. Did it all by yourself. And years later, God's like, you really think you did that?
Yeah.
You really think that was your voice that said, Linda, what are you doing on the floor? There's a baby crying that needs you.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's working with us when we don't even realize it.
And his goodness.
And then when he comes back and drops that reminder on you and says, I was there.
Yeah.
I was the one that tapped you on the shoulder and said, you got to come out of this world.
and first you had to put down something else. You had to put down the cocaine. You had to burn that plow, if you will. And he said, pick up a pen.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember where I read this in the Bible, and so I'm going to have to look it up later. But I remember reading at one point, the creative process. It's us, our attempts to define maybe something is how I'm kind of explaining it for myself. You know, defining what's going on and processing that, reflecting it. But it's refining us and our hearts and our brokenness, and God's working through that creative process in us. And then he's working through us and around us so that we're able to share it with other people, and people can relate and we can relate. And it's this relational experience. I remember reading in the scripture, it was talking about that people, when you bear good fruit, people are going to come and eat of your fruit, and that sparrows and birds are going to come and make homes in your tree, and versus a bare tree or a tree with really poor fruit, and that's one way to remember, like you said, to have discernment. Am I associating myself with content or with people? Or we're talking about gateways to creativity. Am I feeding my brain and my heart and soul with rotting fruit, or is this good fruit that glorifies God, that will ultimately then I'll respond, my soul will respond. There'll be this overflow that can be good fruit for someone else. So I think that's really good. And just, for someone who hasn't read your devotionals yet, Linda, LindaPaskFowler.com. I'm going to keep saying it, if you could, so you've been writing devotionals, like specifically like this last year, being really disciplined in that creative process every day. If you could describe your style of writing in 5 words, what 5 words would you use? Because you're right, you have your own flavor.
I think I would say God's words through my personality.
Yeah.
That's how I write. I throw a little extra something in there somewhere. I'm not exactly sure even what it is, but people seem to pick it up.
Yeah, and you said that you use some so it's your personality. There's your little witty, right? And you're being a little. Would you say you're sarcastic sometimes a little, or
sometimes it could border a little on that?
Yeah, flirt with that line, and you're just using some comic relief too. But I think one word that comes out to me is also just it's really concise, clear. There is some good biblical depth where sometimes I read devotionals. I'm like, well, that's great, but can we talk about the Bible in that and apply it? So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
and it's relational.
I have to have at least one Bible verse to refer to, or it's not a devotional to God.
Yes, that's so good. And so much maybe in our devotional time, and we're reading a devotional, we're thinking, I'm devoting my time to this book, where it's like, no, actually you're devoting this time with your Father and the life source. I think another word that could describe your writing is really relational. I'm on this R kick right now. I don't know, I'm writing all these words down, but I think it is really relational, because you'll say things like, well, the other day, this happened.
Yeah.
And you know what? I had to reflect on that.
Right. I do try to throw
This is what I
personal
learned.
things in, and I'm not afraid to admit that I fail miserably.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share what I did
Yeah.
and how God brought that back around.
Yeah.
And I think people find that easier to relate to in their own lives, to be more forgiving of themselves maybe, and say, well, I guess I'm not the only one who screwed up yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So in your creative process, what type of environment helps you best indulge in your creativity, where you feel lost in it in a good way?
I need to be alone in my room with God.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have my own room for that, and I had to fight for that.
Mm-hmm.
And my family didn't like the fact that I fought for it, but I said, no, I need it.
Yes.
Especially when there were 10 people living in my house. I had to have that
Yes.
area to go to. And so I do have my office, and it's right across from my bedroom, and often I get up and I just stumble across the hall and fall into the chair. But I make it out to that pot of coffee somewhere.
And the Lord is faithful every time when you reserve that space and time and brain space and heart and soul
Yes.
space. He's faithful every time. He's already like, hey, girl, hey, daughter, like I got a message for you.
Right.
I know you're a little groggy, but we'll get through this.
I took a long time to get to it. I remember years ago him telling me, pick up the pen and don't put it down. But I didn't. I put it down. You know,
Yeah.
I put it down and I walked away, and it haunted me forever.
Oh, wow.
Pick up the pen and don't put it down. And it just kept reverberating in the back of my brain until one day I did it.
Yes. That's good. And life gets in the way.
Oh, it does. Yes, it definitely does. You know, and life today, I read recently that we can't raise our kids today the way that our parents raised us, because the world that they raised us for does not exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that to be true, because I've had a very difficult time with my kids and then with my grandkids. But as I look around, it's not just me by a long shot.
Yeah.
It's an epidemic around our, not just our country either. It's a world epidemic where kids are raising kids and they have no place to go, and their parents are on drugs or whatever the case may be. It could be any number of different things that pull them away from properly taking care of their family unit.
Yeah.
And I was raised in what I call a Norman Rockwell house. I mean, we were like the Cleavers. And then I got out of that and into the real world, and what a shock. But as, you know, I've watched these decades roll away. It doesn't seem like it, but I have. The changes are just horrendous. And, you know, that we've gone from the entitlement generation to, I don't even know what you call the kids today.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think they blame a lot, and they say, oh, millennials, this, that. And I think there's a lot of negative things that are said about millennials. And then you got to stop and think.
That happens with every generation.
It
They
does.
always blame
And you
the
have
others.
to look, well, no offense, but who raised them, right? Too. But also it's God uses millennials too.
He uses all of us. And like I said in the last episode, there was when my first son was born, during that period of the 80s, I was hooked on cocaine. I wasn't any better than anyone else. I was on my kitchen floor thinking, oh, there's got to be something here that dropped last night, when suddenly it occurred to me that I had a baby in the room down the hall that was crying for me, and there was no one to tend to him.
Yeah.
And I was on the kitchen floor.
Yeah.
And I thought I pulled myself out of that. I patted myself on the back. Oh, good girl. You didn't have to go to rehab or anything. Did it all by yourself. And years later, God's like, you really think you did that?
Yeah.
You really
like,
think that was your voice that said, Linda, what are you doing on the floor? There's a baby crying that needs you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, he's working with us when we don't even realize it.
And his goodness.
And then when he comes back and drops that reminder on you and says, I was there.
Yeah.
I was the one that tapped you on the shoulder and said, you got to come out of this world.
and first you had to put down something else. You had to put down the cocaine. You had to burn that plow, if you will. And he said, pick up a pen.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And don't put it down. Yeah. So when you do pick up the pen, do you tend to create better pieces of writing with or without rules?
I think probably without rules.
Yeah.
I do have a basic format. I try to stay within a certain length. And I know that what I write is a little longer than the average person really wants to read. So most of my readers are really hungry, really thirsty because they stick with it. But I know that I can't go beyond a certain length either, or I will lose that daily readership. So I think I strive more for maybe not just your casual, I've got 30 seconds, give me something good kind of devotional, to I got a couple good minutes I can sit here.
Yes.
Know? And it does make a difference, between whether you get a couple lines that say, smile today, God is with you, and, he's going to direct your steps, to, well, this happened and that happened, and this is what I did, and this is what the Bible says, and this is what I should have done. And
yeah.
But for people who really are hungry, are seeking, do want something to really chew on, then I try to make sure that it's not so long it's going to take up half their morning.
Yeah.
But it's long enough to really feed into their heart.
And something to savor.
Right.
Yeah.
To say, well, that reminds me of.
Yeah. And so there's some good limits in that, and some wisdom and discernment to say, like, okay.
And it has to be biblically based.
That's another,
And I also have, I call her my editor, and she really is, but she doesn't get paid.
Yeah.
And she is very, very spiritually aware of things. And I send my messages to her, and I ask her to go over them, and please tell me if there is anything that I am doing that is misleading in any way. And sometimes she comes back with something and says, well, I would take this way. And so we feed off each other that way too. I used to tell her that if I have to fly on my own, we're in big trouble. But there have been many days that I have had to fly on my own because she's not had the time to go ahead and preview it and correct it for me before I have already sent it out. But it's usually not anything, I don't think it's ever been anything that was misleading. I think God's always stopped anything like that. But I do think that it's important to run your stuff by other Christians that you can trust, that are knowledgeable, that are walking the road a little bit ahead of you, to say, okay, I understand it.
How did that start for the two of you? Did you just ask? Were you friends for a while? What?
We were friends for a little while. And I really, it's funny because she's the age of my children, but she's one of those that has always been told, and I believe it's true, that she has an old soul.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful friend. And I came to trust her and just really feel like she had more knowledge than I did, that she had read deeper, and I know she has. She's gone way deeper than I have into different books of the Bible and stuff, and that I could trust her opinion. And she was never judgmental, but she would bring up things that, maybe struck a chord differently with her, or from her extensive research, the experts have said something different than what I've said, and maybe I need to go back and look at it a little differently or something. And so I had knowledge of her knowledge and her spiritual contact, and knew that I could trust her.
And you reached out to her
give me an honest opinion. And I asked her, and I asked my pastors at the time too. I said, will you guys please look these over and don't let me send anything that's misleading. Well, eventually it turned out that I would send things on my own, but I had more experience with it, and so far I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've received different, create creativity or affirmation in your creativity. And sometimes that comes from someone who's kind of helping to edit the work or just a second pair of eyes. But what I want to know too is, like, what encouragement do you have for aspiring fellow authors, artists, and musicians?
Well, the first thing is don't let anything interfere with your time with God. And you have to fight for that a lot because people think you're selfish. And they don't want to give you that time and that space. But you have to make it, because if you can't get alone with God and your thoughts, you just can't put the stuff together. It's good when you have a group of like-minded people that are bouncing ideas off each other, but that alone time is just really something special. And then another thing that Rabbi Schneider has said that stuck with me all the time, too, is always be reading a good book. And a good book is the key there, not just don't go out and get 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes. Oh, goodness.
But if you're reading books that are written by respected Christian authors, things of that nature, find somebody whose work you enjoy and read. Always have something. I'm terrible because I'll have a book out for 6 months that I'm reading, but I still keep it out, and I'll open it up occasionally. All right, where was I?
Yeah.
But always have something ready to be an encouragement to you as well, because you can't always just pull it out of yourself. Sometimes you need encouragement from others.
It's true. And because we aren't the source of our creativity,
right.
It's the Lord. Yeah. And in his goodness. So yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm writing notes down, and I'm still on this R word kick today, reflect and refine and reorient, replenish, reserve, relate. The message needs to reverberate and resonate to others. That's the creative process. You want to share that. But before you share it, it's relish the alone time with God, to just relish that and appreciate that and marinate in it and see it as a blessing in of itself.
It is. It's very important. And to do that first thing in the morning, for me, is very important, because if I don't get it first thing in the morning, I can leave my light on and my book open all day and never get back there.
Yeah.
I go to bed, I say, I got to turn my office light off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have every intention of getting back to it, and then life takes over, and people won't give you that time if you don't take it.
Resolve. There's another R word. I'm telling you, I don't know what this means, but the R's today in the creative process, having resolve to reserve that time. Yeah.
And not feel guilty when, I want you to do this, or Grandma, can't you help me with that? Or Grandma, that's supposed to be my bedroom.
Yeah.
No, you lost it.
Yeah.
But
you got, oh my gosh, these words, maybe it's the coffee. You got to reshuffle a few things, boot someone out of their room, and they can take this other room in the house. And
do whatever is necessary to create that time in your day for you and the Lord. That's what he's looking for with each and every one of us, is that relationship, a personal relationship with
far
us.
Before the results or the product.
Come to me, let's sit together, and then I'll travel with you today, but don't leave me behind.
Yes. And I think that's so true in the creative process. As Christians, we got to remember that relationship with God far outweighs and trumps the results or the product, if you will, as we're creating. That's so good.
It's a very personal thing between each one of us and him, whether anybody else likes it or not.
Yeah.
But I find that the more you try to do it for him, the more other people like it.
Yeah. Yes. It's just the way we're wired. You discern what fruit tastes good and what doesn't, what trees are bearing that fruit, and you go to that not because they're idols and they are God, but that they're receiving from the living well, the living water. So, well, thank you, Linda. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the top 5 gateways to creativity for other artists, authors, and musicians.
Okay.
So here we are back again with Linda Pask Fowler. She's a Christian author, and she's been working really hard the last year on working on a devotional. And so you can check that out at lindapaskfowler.com. And so we're working on a series where I'm interviewing Christian artists, musicians, and writers. And so Linda's been sharing a lot of her wisdom throughout the decades of being a writer and just exploring the creative process. And so what I have been wanting to ask artists, musicians, and writers is, what does it look like to have these gateways to creativity? And we know that God is the source. We want to be Christ-centered in this conversation. God is the source of all creativity in life. And so that connection to God, that is the utmost, gateway to that.
For sure.
But what other tips would you give for inspiration, Linda?
Well, one thing I think is really important is to stay connected with your Christian friends. I know a lot of people want to be on an island all by themselves, but it's just, you can't build yourself up. You need others. Iron does sharpen iron, and you need good Christian friends to bounce ideas off of and just let them breathe life into you. And then I think you want to listen to people. Listen to give positive feedback, not listen to respond. Really listen to hear what people have to say, and that helps then to find ways to encourage them better if you really hear them out. I think singing is a big encourager. For me, it is. I love contemporary Christian music, and I like to just crank it up, and so I don't care what I sound like. I want to just sing away, and it just really feeds the soul and stirs something inside you and makes you want to move. And then reading, always have a good book to read. You can read my stuff. But seriously, just having new information that is things that it will lead you to Christ and make you think about your walk and not just, the latest mystery novel, but something that's really good for your heart. Mm-hmm. And then to make time, always make time for God, and don't let people tell you you're being selfish. Don't let people try to drag you into other things. If you can do it first thing in your day, I think that's the easiest way, because I don't often get back.
You push it on the back burner.
Yep. And then everything else takes precedence, and you need to make that first in your day, first in your life, and then God will help you through the rest.
Yeah.
That'd be my 5 tips.
Yeah, top 5 gateways to creativity. I really appreciate that. And there's a couple notes that I took to affirm everything you just said when we were talking earlier in this episode and the episode prior, as this is a 2-part episode exploring this with Linda. You were talking about singing. And I think when we do that, we're singing praises to Him.
Right.
And if you're going to sing praise, it's fixing your eyes on Jesus, and it's coming from a place of gratitude. And we're looking to God's character in that. So it's a gateway, praise and gratitude, because we're praising his creativity. We're praising His faithfulness, His goodness. And there's a lot of gratitude and praise that comes from reflecting on our own testimony and just everywhere He's brought us from, and just He's so faithful. And so I think that kind of refreshes, and provides a new way to creativity and to experience creativity with God. And to affirm what you were saying about connection with people, you were talking about earlier, mentoring people. The body of Christ, we need that affirmation and to bounce off ideas. Yeah, absolutely. And then you were mentioning earlier as well, just keeping our eyes and ears open. And so the word awareness comes to mind. And you were mentioning keeping your eyes and ears open to the world around you. Be mindful of the way you're thinking, but even like nature. If you want to create, and you want that, you got to be connected to the source. That's
Right.
God, right? That life
Exactly.
source. But look to what he's created and take time to really consider the wisdom it took to create that, but also just the beauty and the appreciation he has for every form of creativity. There's nature that just is awe-inspiring and humbling and exciting and really unique.
It is. I agree.
And it just, for me, it brings about like a sense of peace. And like you said, for top 5 gateways to creativity, listening to Christian music or sermons or other written compositions or things like that. Maybe there's other podcasts, whatever it is. Eat good fruit from trees that bear good fruit. And I think too, you didn't mention it in your top 5, but we've been talking about it. In your creative process, you have several different Bible translations.
Yes.
And so I think that kind of is a gateway and some inspiration of just changing a different angle. You're coming in from, like you said, the global impact translation with the ESV and all of that. I think that adds extra perspective that I know as a reader, I had no idea about,
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. And I think too, for me, and when I'm creating mostly music and things along that realm, I think for me it's I document things, and everybody has their own process. Whether it's just napkins, writing on napkins and sticky notes, and they're laying all over the place, or it's a gratitude journal like you were talking about earlier, Linda, or whatever that looks like. For me, I have dry erase boards. Even as we record podcasts, I've got notes all over these things. But even like in my bedroom or office or things like that, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night with an idea or whatever it is, or before bed, and I'm just pouring out these words, and it helps me. I don't know. It just helps me reorient, reprioritize.
Gives you little nuggets to grab onto.
It does. You're like, well, that's not from me, because there's no way I could have come up with something so clever. That was from the Lord. Thank you, Lord. You know. And I think He's going to keep pouring in that creativity for you other authors and writers and musicians. And songwriters. He's just going to keep pouring into you as you're being faithful with the little he gives you.
Right.
Yes.
Show up and say, here I am. Have your hands open.
And that what he entrusts you with will increase more and more, So, so thank you again, Linda, for joining us. That's our top 5 gateways to creativity. Yeah, so hopefully that's been an encouragement to you, Linda. It's been to me.
I've enjoyed it.
It's been fun just getting to talk to you.
Exactly. Fellowshipping with like-minded Christians.
It's so good. But so thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon over a podcast.
All right, thanks, Lucia.